That's a bit scary. First speaker of the day, first speaker of TEDxBrisbane. But it's exciting. It's really exciting. I mean, I think I'm really sort of energized by the potential of today. I think that, whoa, that's not supposed to happen. I'm energized by the fact that you've had a preview. This will happen. But no, I'm really excited about all the stuff that today's going to offer. And what I'd like to talk about is challenging conventions, stepping outside your comfort zone. Chris said earlier in that recording that curious people, curious minds. I'm absolutely curious about so many things. I'm interested in everything, which is really exciting and exhausting. But I think that something like TED and groups like this are great venues and great formats to share those ideas. For me, that idea of being curious and questioning things has led me to do some rather unorthodox things for my field, which I'll talk to you about in a few minutes. But I want to, do you guys know Michael Lunick, the Australian cartoonist? Yes? Brilliant, isn't he? He's fantastic. I remember seeing this in one of his books years back, and it's a book about his conversations with God. And this says, God give us strength to hold on and strength to let go. I think for me, when I first saw this, I thought, wow, that really sums up where many people can find themselves. That they're hanging on to something and they're afraid to make a decision, afraid to let go because what's going to happen if I do something? Afraid to stay because what's going to happen if I stay? What am I going to miss out? And I think that can be a sort of a paralysis of not allowing you to make a decision. And I think for me, it's really about just make a decision and see what happens. You will never really know what could possibly happen. We try and predict what might happen to us, and I think that can be the sort of force behind this paralysis. No disrespect to Mr. Medusa, we can't predict what's going to happen. Things change. We do something, we make a decision, it leads us to down another path, and that's kind of what I get excited about, that unpredictability about where you can go. In my case, as Carl was saying, I used to live in Sydney, and my wife and I were driving down Elizabeth Street in Sydney, and she said to me, what would you do, what would you say if I applied for a job in Kununurra? I was like, great! Where's Kununurra? She said, oh, well, Kununurra. It is 3,212 kilometres north of Perth. It's not very close to Sydney. In fact, actually, if you want to go from Sydney to Kununurra, generally speaking, you're going to be Sydney, Perth, Broome, Kununurra. That will take you in airplanes and airports 10 hours. You could be in Asia quicker. You haven't left the country. So, I lived in Sydney. I was thinking, actually the other thing is Sydney, right? Population of, 5 to 6 million. Kununurra, population of about 5 to 6,000. It's a suburb in comparison. Also, the closest city, really, is Darwin, which is somewhere there. And that's probably the closest, biggest hub, and it's a 1 hour flight away. The other direction is Broome, and that's a 1 hour flight the other way. So we're pretty much in the middle of nowhere. Now, you might think, because when I lived in Sydney and I was worked at Saatchi's, that was our view from the office. Wow, so you wouldn't be surprised when people came to me and said, "What are you thinking? You're leaving Saatchi's going to Kununurra?" In Saatchi's, we had a staff of about 6 in the design team. That was connected to the agency, which had about 160 people. The agency is part of a network that's got 10,000 people, and I was going to Kununurra on my own if I took this decision. So why would I go to Kununurra? Well, Kununurra is absolutely beautiful. You can't really see there, but it's got lots of greenery. This is water, beautiful red. They do amazing big electrical storms from the wet season. It's phenomenal. Now, I talked earlier about outside comfort zones. I'm Irish. I'm hardly equipped to live somewhere like this. In this water, we have some beautiful little animals. In certain areas, there are freshwater crocodiles, 3 meters. In other areas, there are saltwater crocodiles, 5.7 meters. This little lady is about 5 meters. It's so remote that Indiana Jones can't make it. It's so really, when you look at it like that, why would you leave Sydney and Saturday and go somewhere like this? Well, my beautiful wife decided that this job she wanted to take was there, so really, I guess all you need is love. That's what will take you there. Now, there are lots of things that sort of happened to me when I went to Kununurra. As a graphic designer, I thought, right, well, there's no graphic design studios there. I don't have any studio to join. I've got to set my own company up. I've got no experience in that. I've got no clue, really. I don't have any clients. It's really gone blind. So it's like that Michael Looney thing. You just got to let go and do it. So one of the things that was great, because the population in Kununurra, about 60%, I think, is Aboriginal. I think it's 60%. And I was working a lot with Indigenous organisations. And I have I'm not an expert in Aboriginal culture, but I have this view as a graphic designer that how we portray Aboriginal culture is very one-dimensional. It's very one-eyed, and usually it's painting and dot painting. And I think that it really doesn't fulfill the length and breadth of what Aboriginal culture is, and I think we pigeonholed it into this dot painting kind of visual perception. So when I was sort of deciding on what kind of work I was going to do, I thought, I want to challenge this. I want to challenge how we work with Aboriginal culture and how we portray it and depict it. So my first project was with an Aboriginal trust called Gilganian Trust, and I went to the presentation. I was to do a brochure and collateral, and it was about the land agreement between the traditional owners and the Darwin line. And I was at this presentation, and I thought, right, I'm going to do it. I've got 9 Aboriginal trustees looking at me. I've got 2 who don't know me, 2 independent trustees who don't know me, a bunch of mining executives who work with my wife, but they don't really know me. And I'm saying, guys, what we do to portray Aboriginal culture is wrong. We're just painting. My God, dot painting. Why are we doing this? There are other ways. I had 8 Aboriginal trustees staring blankly at me. I had mining execs dropping their heads. And I had 1 Aboriginal trustee nodding her head. Yes, yes. I was saying, painting's important, but it's not everything. There are other ways we can do this. She was nodding her head. I found out later she was the only painter on the panel, and she understood that painting's important. Dot painting is only one area of Aboriginal painting, and only in one geographic location. So I kind of thought, well, they've given me a leeway to explore this, and I've stepped out of my own comfort zone. I've challenged the convention in my work when I can. And with this particular piece of work, because it was about the agreement between Aboriginal traditional owners and a mining company, Argyle Mine, I thought, it's about the land, let's just use the land. So a very, very simple idea is a pile of red dirt. So what? If you look at Aboriginal culture, that is country, that is home, that is part of their culture, that is where they belong. It has immense cultural value. You look at the mining companies, that's what they look for the resources. That's the value. So what I was hoping to do and what I've been trying to do is speak to both non-Indigenous and Indigenous in a way that respects both parties equally. Also with this, a very simple idea, we start off with a pile of red dirt, or red earth, but that can then be used to make other, as a visual language, we can do other things to explain certain things about the agreement, and all of a sudden we have this visual language that is still relevant to Aboriginal culture and the mining companies, but is not dot paintings. The other thing about challenging conventions, I really enjoy working with people who challenge conventions. In terms of Aboriginal culture, there's an amazing writer called Alexis Wright, award-winning writer who wrote a book called Grog War, which challenges the whole alcohol addiction within Aboriginal communities. So I work with Magabala Books, and they asked me to redesign this book cover. And living in Kununurra, I saw lots of discarded cans and things, and beer cans, and I thought, what a really good way to express what she's talking about is to say, this is what it's about. It's about discarded beer cans around. This is what's devastating Aboriginal culture, but it's also the energy that is being used to fight it, to crush it. So I've been really lucky to try and redefine how we can project Aboriginal culture with more relevant symbolism and in a more contemporary way, with equal respect. So I think all you need to do is really take a chance in a different direction when you're challenging conventions and stepping outside your comfort zone. Now, very, very quickly, interesting story, in Kununurra. Well, actually, my wife thinks I look like David Wenham. What do you think? So, she reckons I look like David Wenham, and there's a little film you might have heard of from Baz Luhrmann called Australia, which was filmed in Kununurra, actually, some of it. And my wife said, hey, go and do casting. We could pretend that David Wenham did a cameo. So I went, yeah, funny. Okay, I'll go and give it a shot. And so I'll go, and as it turns out, he is in it. And as it turns out, I end up being his stand-in for a couple of things. So I'm on set with Baz Luhrmann, Nicole Kidman, David Wenham going, whoa, I'm in Kununurra. What are the chances? You make a decision, you never know where it's going to lead. More interesting, I was also at the time commissioned by the Irish National Postal Service to design a set of stamps. What was the theme? Filmed in Ireland. I'm on a set, Hollywood-style set, in Kununurra, researching a project that I'm working for in Ireland. And the set of stamps, again, using challenging conventions, this is a format for a stamp that's not very often used, but it was really good for getting my idea across of having a film script clipping. And the four stamps were a bit like this, and then you put them together, you've got stamps, right? So really, I think all you need is a famous doppelganger. It happens! So, I'm going to get back to this. There was a time when I graduated from design school where I had this idea, hey, I might do a publication, but I'm not a journalist, I'm not an editor, I'm not a publisher, what do I know? I spent 8 years hanging on that piece of rope going, should I, shouldn't I, what'll I do, maybe. And then one day I said, well, just give it a shot, see what happens. And the publication is called Open Manifesto, and what it tries to do, a little bit like TED, it tries to look at how things are connected, how graphic design relates to society, culture, politics, economics, and how it affects graphic design. This issue I talked to two graduates. One was an Aboriginal design graduate, one was a Muslim graduate, and I was looking at things that we don't normally hear in the graphic design field. Issue 2, I didn't think I'd get past issue 1. Issue 2, would you believe Edward de Bono wrote for me? Do you know Edward de Bono? Yeah, Edward de Bono, I mean, Jesus, I had a phone call from Edward de Bono. Issue 2, I interviewed Stefan Seidmeister, he's a gentleman, it's just amazing. This issue 3, this is about, what is graphic design? I had the privilege of talking to an Israeli graphic designer who lost his child to Palestinian bombing, and at the time was saying, we need to set aside divisions, and he's now in the parents' circle, which is trying to get Palestinian and Israeli people together to fight this terrible situation. He doesn't hate anyone, he just says, this happens, we fight it. This is the sort of thing that interests me in the field I'm in, and I'm questioning what I do as a profession. So I do this publication to ask people to find out, share experiences. This issue, propaganda, issue 4, I interviewed Noam Chomsky. I interviewed Academy Award-winning Errol Morris. It's just crazy. In fact, when someone like me is preparing to do an interview with Noam Chomsky or take a phone call from Edward Bono, it's a pretty good laxative. It really This issue is about identity. And I spoke to an ex-CIA operative. I spoke to a real-life superhero in Florida called Master Legend. I spoke to some people who did an article about North Korean people moving to refugees moving to South Korea, and how they're working with their identity between North and South. It's a fascinating way for me to learn what I can that's related to my field, but it scares the hell out of me. And that's what I think is, it's like the omnibus edition. You just start and I'm telling you all the things you need. So you need this, you need this, but really, this sort of sums up what pushes me in Open Manifesto. Now, we talked about identity, and that as a graphic designer, there's also an opportunity to use what I've learned through this, to use how I've learned things living in Kununurra and moving into different areas. We lived in Kununurra for 3 years, so I had a really good understanding of living in certain circumstances. But I constantly watch the news. I'm reading wherever I can, and it's given me a voice. I was asked once to do a poster for a competition, and I called it was around 2006 with the President Bush foreign policy, and the Prime Minister Howard's foreign policy was quite similar, and I thought, well, I need to make a comment on that. And I thought this is called a slight difference. Really, at the time, 2006, this summed up for me what was going on between Australian culture and American culture. There was just a slight difference because of policy and everything. I went and saw this exhibited in Melbourne, and there was a man standing next to it looking at it, and he didn't know I designed it, and he just said very quietly, "Whoa, that's scary." Now, if we look at it now, and we say, hang on, we've got this, and we've got President Obama, we want to be that. Yeah, that's great, that's fantastic. So it's interesting how our sort of mind shifts between how situations change. And for me, it interests me to do work that is sort of timeless or can have more meaning beyond the point it was made. Again, with this whole idea of identity and cultural identity, which is something that goes through Open Manifesto as well, I've been able to be probably more aware than I've had in the past about Australian cultural identity and national identity. So there's an amazing project in Adelaide from 3 very young, talented designers called the Australia Project. And they're looking at Australian national identity and cultural identity. And they invited me to do some work for that. And I thought, great, I've been doing this for ages. But when it came down to it, I thought, God, how do you sum up what's going to happen or what is happening with national cultural identity? And I started looking at, well, if you look at Australia, we're sort of a Caucasian multicultural country. It's very much about Caucasian, white. And I think that although we're trying to get this multicultural sort of side out, we're still putting out Australia predominantly in the mainstream as white population. Plus, if you look at the racial relationships that were going on, racial relations, you've got the Indian situation, you've got Kununurra riots, you've got Aboriginal issues, and I think that a way to sum it up is it's just work in progress, really. We can look at that negatively, we can look at that positively, but I think that we have a lot of work to do as a nation to really get beyond this idea that it is a white country trying to be multicultural. It's multicultural, full stop. Plus, when we look at Aboriginal culture, I think that that might sound sort of down and depressive and negative, but the future for Aboriginal people has to do with their ancestors, has to do with their past. It has to do with their future and their present. The future of Australia is also about Aboriginal culture. We have to really embrace it properly. And when you look at all that kind of stuff I've been talking about, for me, it's really about how you see those connections. Now, I met Nigel Brennan yesterday for the very first time. He's speaking this evening, and we were like, chat. I was from Kununurra. Really? Oh, I went there once. Do you know a girl called? Yes, he's a friend of mine. These connections, I meet somebody for the first time yesterday, he knows someone I know in Kununurra. We're all connected, things are connected. For me, it's all about learning, what TED is about. I'm passionate about learning, I'm passionate about challenging conventions, I'm passionate about getting outside my comfort zone and sharing that with people. And there's one reason for it. It's my philosophy. There's wisdom in learning. Thank you.